watching NRA TV with Bill Whittle.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Hot Mike Show. I'm Bill Whittle. Hot Mike had a wardrobe malfunction. He's been taken to the hospital via ambulance, and we should have some word on his status by tomorrow. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about this entire idea of the world turned upside down. Earlier today on the Grant Stinchfield Show, we listened to a very emotional piece by a New York City police officer. I think it was a New York City police officer. He was certainly a police officer. And he was responding to the fact that this woman who was part of the NYPD was shot in her car and killed a week ago. And he wants to know where the celebrities are. He wants to know why is it that the punks and the murderers and everybody else are being celebrated. And when one of the bad guys gets killed, every celebrity in the world is out there, including Colin Kaepernick and all the rest. But now that a police officer's been shot, where are they? We'll come back to this in a minute. It's extremely moving, and we'll play some of it for you in its entirety. But when I was listening to this morning, I was left a little bit mute by it. It's not just the anger in this policeman's voice, it's the anguish, really. I think the realization that has finally hit him, as it's hit many of us, that the world is just nuts. It's upside down. Good is bad, bad is good. Everything that makes sense is now senseless, and vice versa. And so there's a couple things I'm going to go over with our guest today, but obviously that's the first one. He was talking about where the celebrities, people in the violent left and the Black Lives Matter movement are not only they're celebrated, they're taken to the White House and they're being shown the Oval Office, and the Attorney General Loretta Lynch tells them, hey, you guys are doing a great job, and so on and so forth. So there's that. George Lopez a few days ago, as we mentioned, there you can see the Medal of Freedom being given to Robert De Niro, who said he'd like to punch George Bush in the mouth, and so on and so forth. Kathy Griffith, of course, holds up her beheaded head of Donald Trump, which is just more assassination porn. There's the assassination porn in New York City with the Julius Caesar show where Donald Trump is stabbed to death. George Lopez, as I said, mentions that he thinks the police should be deported. Here you can see Kathy Lopez getting ready for her big shoot, and then she holds up her decapitation head of Donald Trump, and so on and so on and so on and so on and so on. And then also we had a statement from a so-called news organization that simply made my blood run cold. So I'd like to get into all of this today. And in order to talk about this sort of across the board, we really need to bring in somebody with just really tremendous insight and depth and warmth and a great deal of wisdom. We had that person booked, and they're not available, so we have Andrew Klavan with us, joining us instead at the last minute.
Hey,
Andrew, thanks for sitting in at the last minute. Appreciate you coming in on short notice like that.
I was told I was going to be on with the real Hot Mike, so I'm a little disappointed to find that it's just you.
Everybody's disappointed. He had a conniption fit. He really did. He just had a cow, and his hair was bad, so he just couldn't get on today. But Drew, this is something that we did probably almost 1,000 shows together talking about life back at the previous location. And we haven't had a chance to talk much really in the last several months. So I was wondering if we could just kind of go around the block and talk a little bit about this world post Donald Trump, and not just since the election, but also really in the last 8 years, especially, and really in the last 20 or 30 years, this inversion of morality, this absolute inversion of morality, and things that have just become so far out of whack now. They're no longer askew. As I say, they're inverted. So let's just start for a minute and listen to a little bit of this from this police officer, if you don't mind. We'll just play a little, 20, 30 seconds of this clip from this police officer reacting to the shooting of one of his colleagues a few days ago.
Officer Familia was killed, 4-6 precinct, New York City Police Department. The one thing I want to know is, where the hell are all the celebrities now? Where's all the sports teams wearing NYPD stuff? Where's the hands up, don't shoot people? Where are you right now? Why is it every thug every career criminal, every piece of garbage, low-life scum of the earth gets the attention when they're shot and killed for breaking the law, for threatening others.
Where are they, Drew? Where are the celebrities?
Yeah.
Where is Colin Kaepernick? Where are all these people?
Well, the actors are all making a fortune pretending to be policemen on television and in the movies. But when the real police are under the gun, of course, they can't show up because, as you know, they'll be expelled from the Hollywood community. You talk about the world turned upside down. Last week, we saw Donald Trump give a speech in defense of Western civilization, and the left turned out and said, "Oh, Western civilization, that's a code word for white supremacy." And then we saw left-wing activist Linda Sarsour call for jihad against Donald Trump. And the same leftists came out and said, "Oh, jihad, that means spiritual struggle." So when you talk about the world turned upside down, you ain't kidding. That is exactly what they have done. They have turned the people who are fighting for the values they're supposed to support into the enemy because they're supposedly racist, and they've turned the people who want to kill them into their friends, the people who want to oppress women, oppress gay people, all these things, and suddenly the Islamists are their pals and jihad is what they stand for. And it's just a tangled chain of logic that has gotten them to that place. And I think that I couldn't help but feel for this officer because
Me too.
if you turn on TV, you'll see one actor after another getting to steal some glory from police officers by pretending to be them in some action adventure film. But when it turns out that one of them is in trouble, one of them needs some support, one of them needs a vigil for the dead, the mother of three, this police officer was, they're nowhere to be found. He's absolutely right.
For those of you who don't know, Andrew's a writer, and he's actually a very good one, despite my personal opinion. No, but seriously, Andrew's a very good writer, a very, very good writer. And Drew, so what's going on with the motivation for this? When George Lopez, for example, puts out an Instagram that says, "Hey, President Trump, if you want to make America safer instead of deporting illegals, you want to make the streets safer, deport a cop." And Kathy Griffin holds up the severed head of Donald Trump and all of this celebrity stuff that this police officer was talking about so passionately. What is the script they're following? Surely they don't actually believe this. Certainly these rich multimillionaire celebrities aren't really in favor of deporting the police, needless to say. Surely they are more dependent on police protection than just about anybody. You said that if they don't do this, they're going to be basically expelled from the Los Angeles celebrity community. What is the script that these people are following that makes them say and do such reprehensible things? And also, conversely, what is the same script that prevents them from coming to the emotional aid of people like policemen and like the one we saw in that video?
Well, you have to start with they call it a bubble. They say they're in a bubble, but the bubble is made of iron. I'm not sure what the word for that is. You have to understand how completely isolated they are from the consequences of their thoughts and actions. This is partly because of wealth. It's partly because they're in a community that only consists of themselves. I live virtually in Hollywood, and for a while lived next door to one of the biggest stars in the country. I won't say who it was, but all day long there were men with guns going in and out of this house to protect this celebrity, to keep this celebrity safe. And yet this celebrity is one of the biggest spokesmen against gun ownership in the country. So the leap that it takes to say, "Oh, I can afford to hire men with guns, but your next door neighbor, Andrew, who just keeps a gun on his own for home protection, he shouldn't be allowed to do that because they're so dangerous." That leap is beyond them because they're just so protected from the consequences of their thoughts and actions. And they're following a script, a virtue script, that has been laid out for over the last 50 or 60 years. And the script goes something like this. Certain minorities were, and this is true, certain minorities were kept out of the good things of Western culture, the good things of equality of under the law, and the good things of prosperity brought on by capitalism. And so the original argument was let us in. And I think most people of goodwill, I lived through some of this, most people of goodwill said, yes, that's right. We have to let everybody who is an American into the good things of America. That left these people with no fight to fight. It left them with no heroism to pursue. It left them with nothing to make them look righteous. And so they get this cheap righteousness by essentially saying, oh, because Western culture kept these people out, Western culture itself is no good. And of course, you can see the illogic of that. It was the good things of Western culture that they wanted to be included in the first place. So now you have people saying Black Lives Matter as if there were anyone in the country who doesn't think that Black Lives Matter. I mean, what a arrogant, offensive thing to say to the rest of us, that Black Lives Matter, as if you and I, Bill, are sitting around over our beers saying, that that's not the case, and it's all like that. Think of Obama not wanting to mention the word Islam in connection with terrorism. Why? It's because you and I are so stupid, such knuckle-dragging idiots, that if we even hear those two things connected, we're going to go out and do some harm to people with different religions.
We'll beat the local shop owner
of us. They never see us.
A pulp.
They're never in contact with us. That's their opinion of us from their protected ears.
Right. What you said,
that's it.
Sorry.
We're just
I think
animals,
the thing that
and like you hear it in every word
that's
they
right.
say.
And that is the way that they get to be better than other people. You mentioned this virtue script, and I think you're right on, Andrew. When America's run out of actual injustice, when we've passed peak injustice, in order for celebrities to show how good they are, they have to go to synthetic injustice, right? If everybody of goodwill, as you said, was against things like slavery, they were against all of these forms of institutionalized oppression. And when those things were eliminated from America, by the way, you said that that many people wanted the benefits of Western civilization and the goods of Western civilization. And one of the best things about Western civilization, in my opinion, Andrew, is the fact that we opened it up to everybody, right? I mean, that really is a denial of the entire premise in the first place. If white Westerners were so awful, they wouldn't have basically created a world where somebody can come over, and it's as long as they do it legally and they raise their hand and they take the oath and they fill out the forms and do all the rest, they become as American as somebody whose descendants are from the Mayflower. So they have to have something to show their virtue. And I think this virtue signaling is the key to the whole thing.
It is, and it's what's so amazing. And going back to the theme of the world turns upside down, not that long ago, I gave a speech at Oberlin College in Ohio, which is in the heart of liberal darkness. Okay, I mean, this is one of the most liberal colleges. Yeah, it's incredible. They have
it's where reason and logic go to die.
To die, exactly. They have a dorm there for black students, a segregated dorm. And you sit there and say, like, how did that happen? I mean, Martin Luther King would roll over in his grave if he saw this. Well, it happens because after the fight, what they've done essentially is they've adopted the values that they said they were fighting against. So they've adopted the racism they said they were fighting against. And their theory is, well, before you were racist against black people, so now if we can be racist against white people, it'll all balance out. But they don't understand. The devil don't care who you hate as long as you're hating somebody. All the racism goes in one side, and if you adopt other people's values, if you adopt the enemy's values, you get the enemy's results, and that's where they are. The expression. I don't know I can't remember who said this, but there's an expression that every revolution devours its own children. And of course, you saw this in the French Revolution when they started beheading the revolutionary leaders. You saw it in the Communist Revolution, when Stalin started wiping out all the people who had been the original communists. And you're seeing it now with the 60s revolution, is that the idea, this is a new generation that's come along and has nothing to basically rebel against. This country is doing quite well and will be doing better, I think, once we get some better policies in place. They have nothing to rebel against, so they're just like devouring each other, basically. I mean, you can't. Right. You can't please these social justice warriors. There's nothing you can say to them that will make you a good guy, especially if you're white and male.
No, it's like Outlander, right? There can only be one. If your entire philosophy is based on victimhood, then somewhere logically there has to be a final top victim. This is like the top level boss in a video game. Somebody's got to be the ultimate final top victim. And so what you find is, as you just mentioned, you'll find cases which I have to tell you, Andrew, I'm not as good a man as you are. These kind of things, these little stories fill me with great deal of joy and delight. You'll find stories of these lifelong feminists, let's say, these women who are 65 years old or whatever, and they've been fighting this feminist cause since they were 19, and they'll go and speak at a liberal college like Oberlin, expecting to soak up all of the gratitude and the admiration and the love of the people who they were fighting for. And what they find instead is, after a year of 40 years of championing feminism, they find that they're being attacked by, let's say, young black women who say, you can't be a feminist. What do you know about feminism? You're a white privileged person. You can't possibly know what it's like. And they are being devoured by their own creation. And every now and then you'll hear one of them say what I'm sure almost all of them believe, which is, namely, we have created some absolute monsters out there, and we're afraid of our students now. We're afraid of them.
Of course they are. I mean, they've adopted this idea that free speech should be shut down if we disagree. You know, they always do the same thing. They take nonviolent actions and they translate them into violence to justify violence against nonviolent people. I know that sounds like a little bit of a tongue twister, but it's true. They start by saying speech is violence, and therefore we have a right to respond to speech with violence. So you get up to speak and they attack you violently, which is happening at colleges around the country. You know, it really is interesting that you look at Donald Trump, who basically, as Ted Cruz once accused him of having, has New York values. He basically doesn't care what color you are. He doesn't care what your sexuality is. He doesn't care, you know. He just wants to keep people out of the country who are criminals, and he wants to keep terrorists in their place, and he wants to go to the places where and that is what has made him the target of this violent rhetoric. It's quite extraordinary. You see gay people marching against the guy who has to be the most openly pro-gay person ever to be elected president, because you remember Obama lied about it, but Trump didn't. You know, he never had a problem with it. You have a guy who basically, you know, it really could care less what color you are, but he says, look, you got to come into the country legally. That's a rule of law issue. That's not a color issue. There's no color
no, of course
barrier
not.
there. It's just the rule of law. And suddenly that makes him a bigot. You know, he says, look, some of these Islamists want to kill us, which is obviously true. And after 8 years of a president who cannot even speak the words, he can't get the words out because he's so afraid of how evil and violent we are. Here you have a guy who's just speaking quiet, open, honest truth. And that somehow violates the multicultural Bible. You know, it really is in some ways pitiful to see these left-wingers not just devouring themselves, but devouring the ground on which they stand. The reason we tolerate them is because we believe in free speech. The reason we haven't gone down there and just beaten the living daylights out of them is because we believe they have the right to say the stupid things that they say. And so they're actually eroding with their attack on Western values, with their attack on Western culture, with their tolerance of people who hate Western value and hate Western culture. They really are eroding the very ground on which they're standing.
And Donald Trump, as you said earlier, just a few days ago, gave, I thought, was a terrific speech in Poland.
Great speech.
And he talked about the fact that Western values do things like we write symphonies and we pursue science and we try to find out how much there is to know, because the more we know about ourselves, the better we can deal with life. He says that we value the input of women. We value that every individual human being, and so on. And he's vilified for this. He was called a white nationalist speech. And if those words had been spoken by Barack Obama, they would have praised him to the heavens. So you're right. They are not only devouring their own individuals, they are devouring their own self-proclaimed ethical system. When you have these Antifa people on the left writing an open letter to Democrats saying, hey, listen, you need to get violent out there and start beating up these Trump people, because if you don't, Drew, if you don't go out there and beat up our political opponents, then fascism will come to America. What do you say to people like that, Drew? If you don't go out there and beat these people to a pulp, then fascism is going to come to America.
That is one of my favorite. I mean, it would be comical if it weren't so dangerous. Is these guys who call themselves anti-fascists put on masks and then hit people with sticks, and you go like in the term, anti-fascist. The phrase "anti" stands for nothing, because that is fascism in action. And when this police officer, going back to him, when he says, "Where are the celebrities?" Turn on Stephen Colbert some night and watch the relentless. What he does is he trains his audience in how to react to things. He tells them, "Oh, Donald Trump is colluding with the Russians." This crazy story about it turns Donald Trump into Boris Badenov, and he trains them how to say this, so they know that if they want to be part of the cool Stephen Colbert set, they have to agree with him. They have to boo Republicans, boo Donald Trump. And think about this for just a second. There must be, I've lost count, but there must be at least seven late night comics, on television, on mainstream television. Every single one of them is a liberal. Every single one. And when Jimmy Fallon committed the religious heresy of being kind of nice to Donald Trump, not particularly supportive, but just pleasant and polite to him, he was basically, tormented in the press until he had to apologize. He had to come out and say, "Oh, well, I didn't mean to be nice to him." And so when this officer asks, "Where are the celebrities?" that's where they are. That's what they're doing. I have to tell you this story. I went to Afghanistan very briefly during the war for City Journal to write an article about it. But before I went, they asked me to go to Fort Bragg and train there with the soldiers a little bit. And I was sitting in one of those vehicles. I forget what they're called. The big, those big like tank-like vehicles that they drive around in. And I was sitting there having
APCs,
one of those. Yeah, one of those. I was sitting having one of those MREs, those instant lunches they give you, and I'm eating this stuff. And the soldiers gathered around me. They came clustering around this vehicle and looked in the window. And so help me, I'm not making a word of this up. And they looked in at me and they said, "You're from Hollywood, aren't you?" And I said, "I'm guilty. Yes, I am from Hollywood." And they said, "Who likes us? Who likes us?" And I swear, Bill, my heart almost broke in two, because of course I could think of Gary Sinise and I could think of Clint Eastwood. I could think of the very, very few numbers of guys with the courage to stand up and say our military is defending us, and we love you and we want to make movies about you and all this stuff. But it was tough. It was tough to come up with the names. And I just thought, like, here are these guys putting their lives on the line for us, for our values, for our freedom. And here are these other people reaping the rewards of this system. They go out and they read other people's lines and pretend to be people they're not. And we pay them millions and millions of dollars. A fireman makes, I don't know, 50, 60 grand. A guy who plays a fireman makes $1 million a week, So that's the system we're under. And I couldn't name more than 5 actors who supported the troops. And, and as you know, just saying I support the troops is not the same thing as actually supporting the troops. And
that's right.
That was the anguish you heard in that officer's voice. That was what it was about. We build this society, we protect it for you. And you reap the rewards. A little love, a little respect, is that too much to ask?
Not too much. Hang on one second, Drew. We're going to take a very quick break, and we will be right back with my friend and guest, Andrew Klavan, on A World Turned Upside Down right here on Hot Mic here on NRA TV.